Thank you. We're very excited for this panel. I think we've got a great group. I'm very excited for the discussion. I know that we are going to have our state rep who's out at the polls. There's early voting for the primaries. There's all kinds of different elections that are on the ballot, local and state, upcoming here, and there's all kinds of different challenges to any and all of that, but we're excited to have him pop in when he can. But without further ado, I'm gonna just hand it over to Roz McCarthy here in a second. But our panel is titled "Embracing Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion as a Business Culture: A Journey Towards Social Equity in Florida." I'm Eric Stevens. I helped work on forming the Miami chapter of C-Lab. We kicked that off with Rob, and I also worked on getting the amendment passed for medical marijuana here in the state, and kind of its continued implementation as those things go here. And so, without further ado, my good friend Roz McCarthy with Minorities for Medical Marijuana has lined up a fantastic panel, and I want to hear more from them. So I'm gonna jump off. I see we got Chev back. So Raj, Chev, you guys take it from here.
We'll take it from there. Happy 420, brother. I didn't mean to steal your steam, but thank you for having me. Roz McCarthy here, founder and CEO of Minorities for Medical Marijuana. So excited to be with you guys today. Again, we're talking about a conversation very specific to the state of Florida, looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how do we embrace it as a business culture, and more specifically, what's our journey to social equity in the state of Florida. The state of Florida has over 400,000 individuals that are enrolled in the medical marijuana program that are being serviced every single day with medicine in order to make sure that they're healthy and well. We believe that there's opportunities for individuals to not only participate in the program from a medical perspective, but also we look at the socioeconomic, the economic opportunity that can be afforded to communities, and specifically disadvantaged individuals who deserve a right to be able to participate in this industry. So I have a huge panel. Enough about me talking. I want them to introduce themselves, and I'm going to start with the Honorable Florida State Rep Chevron Jones. Please introduce yourself. Tell us what district you are. Tell us what you're doing today, and then we're going to go round robin and have everybody introduce themselves.
Thank you so much, Roz. Thank you for putting this together. It's good to see you and Eric and all the hard work that you all are doing across the state of Florida. My name is State Representative Chevron Jones, and I have the pleasure of representing the 101st District in the Florida House. I've been in the legislature now since 2012. I just turned out and currently running for the State Senate District 35. And I'm looking forward to the conversation for the part that I can be a part of, but I'm looking forward to being here as long as I can.
I appreciate you, brother. We need you as a partner. Next we have Mr. Marvin Washington. Introduce yourself, sir, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, hello, everybody. Marvin Washington. I've been in the space since 2014. Came in as an advocate for athletes, but I did a deep dive into the industry, and since then I've become an investor and sit on 4 different boards, and also being African American, of course, I'm going to advocate, because one of the things that happened early in this deal when I got into it was 2014 and 15. All the conferences and expos I was going to and speaking at and represent my company there, I didn't see any people of color that was there, and so I wanted to change that. And so one of the things that I started doing was, if you're going to have me on these sports panels, well, make a minority sports panel. Let's talk about the people that have been affected the most by prohibition, Black and brown people. And so that's when that started, and I've been pushing that, and I'm still pushing that, because whether it's by omission or commission, people are not going to be conscious of having an equity or fairness or an inclusion or diversity on their boards or in their company. So we have to bring it to their attention, and that's what I try to do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Marvin, for being here with us. Next, we have a friend or sister, someone that I just admire and the hard work that she's doing in the state of Illinois, Ms. Toy Hutchinson.
Hi, everybody. I'm Toy Hutchinson. I'm a former state senator in Illinois, also an immediate past president of the National Conference of State Legislatures. I spent 10 years in our General Assembly in the state of Illinois, and am one of the original drafters of Illinois' very first adult use and equity-centric cannabis law. We're the first state in the country to legalize adult use without going through a ballot referendum. This was done solely through the legislature, and so we were able to build in principles of equity into the actual legislation. It ended up being a 615-page bill that dealt with three things. One, how do you change the face of the industry? What do you do with the money? And how do you undo past harms? From a very, very specific standpoint, that if you're normalizing and legalizing an activity for whom the prohibition of the exact same activity destroyed whole communities, that equity means those people who look like me, need to be made whole. And so I'm really interested in having these conversations. I do them all across the country now. We are in the process of getting these licenses out in Illinois for the first time. So we'll also be one of the first states to get the licenses out in the very same year that the law went live. So we're 8 months in the middle of a global pandemic, looking at 80 years of failed drug policy and trying to diversify an industry that's had a 10 to 15 year head start before anybody was talking about anything that had to do with equity. So
Absolutely.
it's an exciting time, but that's why that's a train in Chicago. So sorry. But that's what I'm here doing and working on. And I would only drop for purposes of the discussion that a fair amount of education needs to happen about the difference between equity and diversity and inclusion. They are not the same thing.
Definitely.
Equity,
They're not the
cannabis space, yes, equity in the cannabis space is we are normalizing and legalizing something that barred whole groups of people and communities. Those groups of people and communities need to be made whole. Diversity and inclusion is that we want our organizations, our businesses, our entire corporate environment, our business environment to be as inclusive and look and be representative of who we are. And that includes us. So they're two different conversations, wholly necessary, wholly needed. But equity cannot be used interchangeably with diversity. And that's what I try to insert into anything I say to any group who's willing to listen, because we're in the planting season right now. And this is a long game.
Absolutely. And you see why I have Toy Hutchinson on today, because that's how powerful she is. So next we have Mr. Chris Nani. Chris, introduce yourself.
Thanks, Roz. I'm Chris Nanny. And,
Nanny, I'm sorry.
Excuse me?
I'm sorry, I pronounced it wrong. Chris Nanny, sorry.
Oh, not a problem. Not a problem. It happens more often than not. And my background is a policy researcher. I initially started studying social equity programs in 2016. And through analyzing different programs, I developed an equation to grade the efficacy of existing programs, as well to be a framework for future programs. And using that equation, I then performed a case study of Los Angeles's program and learned a lot about that program specifically, the good, the bad things, and analyzed those results. My most recent project, I compiled a book with 12 other authors on social equity, all giving different perspectives on certain issues. But once again, these are all experts that are living in these areas that they write about, that they talk about. So very much excited to be here and learn from everyone else as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Next, we have Malik Dexter. Malik, please introduce yourself, sir.
Yes, how's everyone doing?
Good.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Miss Toy Hutchinson, for that clarification. And that I wish I had hit record to get those definitions. So I'll need that in writing later on. So my name is Malik Dexter. I have a very, I would say, diverse background, which starts in tech. But what led me to this space is simply that my older brother developed, after doing very well in tech, my older brother developed a 1-inch scar on his brain, and he began to have seizures. And my admiration of my older brother, who I've always thought was Michael Jordan before there was a Michael Jordan, I was interested in finding out what could be done for my brother. My brother has always smoked marijuana all his life, but I had heard of this wonder aspect of marijuana that existed in California, being that I'm here in Atlanta in the South, that would help him. I had a chain of vegan restaurants and vegan grocery stores, one which is still in Landover, Maryland. And so I cashed it in. I went west, and I found myself in the Emerald Triangle, Humboldt, And because of my background and of course I'm very attentive to the structure of racism. I saw something there that I think should be considered should be in museums. It should be studied by a sociologist. I saw in Humboldt, I saw white people growing a Schedule I drug for 3 generations long, and everybody was okay with it. And when I saw that, it really moved me. I was able to get what I needed for my older brother, and because I am a social entrepreneur as well, I began to transact in that trade. My wealth or my money allowed me to pass out of Blackness to make the exchange, and I was able to purchase. But I realized very, very quickly that in addition to my other pursuits, my entrepreneurial pursuit there in Humboldt, I was in the game and the white guys were in the business. I was selling weed and they were selling, not even marijuana, they were selling the Latinist of the term, cannabis. And so from that point on, I knew that there were more people like myself who represented a crossbreed, not the stereotypical, way that people have seen quote unquote drug dealers, that I represented not an anomaly, but a norm, just simply because of my race being a Black male, that there was more of us who needed to have an opportunity to have inclusion. And by inclusion, I mean ownership. And so I'll just stop right there, and then I'm sure more will come out as we continue to talk.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, sharing that story. And last but not least, we have VJ. How are you, brother? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Roz. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
And for that story, Malik. So I'm General Counsel and Director of Compliance for Grow Healthy. And Grow Healthy is one of the licensed MMTCs, medical marijuana treatment centers here in Florida. There's about 22 license holders. Actually, 14 and 15 are operational. Grow Healthy is one of those. And being that we're vertically integrated in the state of Florida, we're responsible for cultivation, processing, dispensing, marketing, logistics, transportation. It's essentially a multi-layered company all in one. And compliance has a lot of facets according to that. Not only that, we also look at diversity in the state of Florida, especially as it relates to our workforce and what type of methods we're utilizing to attract not only the workforce, but also outside vendors. And that's a key component of every MMTC's license renewal. So not only just the national discussion of diversity, inclusion, and equity that we're all having, but also on the compliance level, having that license renewal, we're also diving deep into that as well. So that's just a little bit about me. I'm happy to enjoy this conversation and learn from you guys.
So thank you, VJ. Thank you so much for sharing, and shout out to the folks at Grow Healthy. This is a great segue, because I guess I'm gonna throw this question out to you guys, and I definitely want Representative Jones, when he's back in, to also weigh in on this, because this is important. How do we get a state like the state of Florida it's the third most populous state in the nation, 21 million people, and you have a diverse background, but you have politically people's thought about social equity and is looked at as a set aside versus being the right thing to do because of the harm that was done on a group of people. How do we have this discussion explaining what social equity is and the difference between diversity and inclusion and social equity? And I think there's some things that Toy touched on, but Rep Jones, especially from your seat, how do we approach this if we're going to make this really happen in the state of Florida?
Well, I think, Toy, she can speak for the rest of this entire conversation, because she summed all of this up. I don't think y'all understand what she even just said. I'm serious. And so, even looking at in the state of Florida right now, and Toy, you make it very clear that so often we try to say equity is equality, or equity is the same thing as diversity, and they're not the same. They're just not the same thing. I look at from the perspective of us, Roz. You know what I went through when we were dealing with the Black farmers here in Florida, to where you have every individual who was lobbying my office was lobbying to get this license, not one person was black, but yet still they lobbied against one license for a black farmer. And then right then and there, you're looking at the legislators, they're making it seem like it's okay. So we have to be extremely careful if the individuals who are sitting at the table in making these decisions to making sure that they understand that equity is not equality, or that they understand that equity is not diversity at the same time. And in a state like Florida, the only way we're going to be able to change that, as you know, Roz, is that we're going to have to continue to change the leadership structure within inside this state. And it's not, and here's what I'm going to say. We are not talking about from the perspective of putting individuals in office who are going to play patty cake with what we know can happen in the state of Florida. Right. I'm talking about individuals who we know for a fact could really do the full, like the Illinois have done, move everything in the direction of making sure that everyone have this type of access. There should not be any instance where you have a true leaf, who I have a great deal of respect for. You have a true leaf in a certain part of the community, but in another part of the community is not there. In the state of Florida, won't allow that city to be able to create the laws to be able to open access for them to have a medical marijuana facility within their area. That's what we're dealing with within Florida right now. We're dealing with leaders who are dealing with the haves and the has-nots. And then you got people who are black who sit at these tables who agree to this stuff, but yet and still they don't want to speak out against the truth on what the things that needs to happen. So the only way we're going to do this in Florida is we're going to have to make sure that we got people like Toy who are calling these things out, creating this good disruption what needs to be created. Individuals like myself at the table who know that we as black folk, we have to make sure that we're not asking for access because they're not asking for access. We're demanding access that we need.
Absolutely. No, I love it. I love it. Anybody else? Like, what do we got to do from a policy perspective and getting the buy-in and making sure we differentiate between diversity, equity, and inclusion is one issue, but my concern is, will the state of Florida, in other states, how do you take that initiative to say social equity is going to be a priority in a bill? And because we know adult use is coming to this state.
I'll add one thing. One is you have to bake in I'm gonna throw a whole bunch of little references at you. You gotta bake in the reality that you're normalizing and legalizing an activity that used to be illegal, and the harms upon that were visited among a particular group of folks. So that when you say people who are harmed the most by the war on drugs, that is 55% African American and upwards of 24 to 30% Latinx communities. That's just an on the ground reality. We know that the war on drugs was administered and promulgated in a race specific way. The problem we have in this country right now is that our judiciary system, our court system, the leadership in chambers across this country, which is now the most divided that it's been since the 20s. If you look at the way states are actually divided down the line now, there are more unified controls, meaning legislature and all the constitutionals are of one party as separate than it has been since the 20s. So and when you come with people who believe in criminal justice reform, where it's okay to talk about undoing criminal justice harms and turning a blind eye to economic justice, because you don't get social justice or racial justice without economic justice. So to tie those things together and not allow anybody to have that conversation absent that nexus is how you embed stuff in policies. One suggestion I would have really for Florida is that if it's going to be a ballot position, then the state's going to have to do enabling legislation. And in that enabling legislation, to actually do what it is that the ballot initiative said do, you take the Massachusetts model and then you build in equity provisions into that statute. And again, we were in the middle of budget impasses. We were in the middle of really dire economic times in Illinois. We had a governor that literally ran the state into the ground. And when that happened, most of our social service safety net providers lost everything. We had all kinds of people who relied on government funding and support who lost everything. And then we come into this thing and you get hit with a global pandemic. The good thing is that when we did this, we tied everything to the plant. So if you were gonna look at how to figure out how to target communities to get where you want it to go, then you start looking at things like zip codes and high rates of arrest and returning citizens and areas where you can say there's disinvestment, underemployment, undereducation, because then you don't have to say black and brown. Now you're saying, because here's a reality. There are people who know how to draft laws that benefit and whose benefits only inure to white people. They don't write the bill saying this is a white people bill. They write a bill and its impact is directly inures to white people. When we know what those statistics are, it's time for us to get very, very strategic so that we can stay in a constitutionally safe ground way and have a pre-enactment strategy and a post-enactment strategy, which deals in the reality of the current environment in this country right now. It is akin to understanding. We all know who Thurgood Marshall was after he did Brown v. Board of Education in the United States Supreme Court. Most people cannot tell you the 5 cases that got them to the Supreme Court, how you had to fight at the beginning to create situations that would elevate and elevate and elevate. So
yes.
Fight on both sides.
Yes.
So it is a fight for the general populace understanding the hypocrisy on this plant, the stigma attached to this plant, and the very real reality that there is a thriving legal industry with millions and billions of dollars being made across this entire country. You don't get to just talk about us when it relates to prisons and crime and crime. Although that's important, because there are some people who'll never touch this plant and they need to be able to go on with the rest of their lives.
Right.
In order to actually move the conversation forward, it has to be clear that everybody's talking and saying the same thing. We are normalizing and legalizing something for whom the prohibition of the exact same activity destroyed generations of blocks and communities and neighborhoods. And you will not do this without us.
Absolutely. I want to pause for a second and remind people, if you're listening to us, make sure if you have any questions, if you're inside, put your questions in the chat. We're going to have time for questions before we're over with. Marvin, you had a comment, and I got a question for you after your comment.
No, I think what Toya said is right, man, because like if you're going to state legislature and talking to them, particularly if they're a majority, they're going to think it's equality, but it's not equality because they know how to write the laws and they'll make it equal. And it's unfair because if there's a 10-foot wall and they say, here, I'm going to give you a 2-foot stool to get over, and they give both to it, that's equality. Well, I'm 7 feet and this person right here is 3 feet. So you need equity where we both have the same height of the ladder to get over that wall. And so how do you do that? Well, you're talking about area codes. You're talking about the people impacts and communities that have been affected most by prohibition. And this is something that has been systematic for 80-something years. You know, so we're not going to get a chance to do this over because people are not going to start sharing their profits. So you have to be diligent. You have to bake it in. You have to make sure that it doesn't move until these things are addressed. I'm telling you, right. Florida has enough of the minority population in the 4 biggest cities to make a difference. Don't move off of that. Make sure if they're going to put an adult program that there's equity built into there. Don't let them get you with equality. Don't let them get you with inclusion and diversity. That's totally something separate. You have to make sure that it's there, and that has to be the basis of any bill. It has to be equity because we've been punished by this. We you know, when it was in the black market, they definitely made sure that we participated with arrests, incarceration, prison industrial system, and all that BS. So now that it's going to the green market, we have to be at the table. We have to be at the table.
Hey, Chris, is there any data in your book or anything that you extrapolated from the book that you think would be powerful content to share to bring local support legislators up to speed on just the sheer nature of what's going on? And I think it's critical in this conversation, you know, about what you put together thus far. Is there data there that we could share that breaks it down?
Yeah, I think the best example would be 2 case studies, one of them being Los Angeles, the other being Illinois. Los Angeles, their social equity program happened after legalization. It started after everyone had a license and they were already established and operating. Illinois did it at the very beginning before anyone else had anything, making it as equal as possible. And so if you wanted to see the difference in the disparities between the two, Los Angeles still hasn't issued 1 license. It's been years, and their program likely isn't going to exist at all just because of a lot of issues going on. So I would say with legalization, there has to be social equity at the beginning for it to be effective.
Yep. Thank you so much. VJ Melik, any feedback before we go to our next question?
Yeah, I had something in the sense that,
Yeah.
you know, when we started this program in 2000, or at least when what this program looks like today, when we had that law in 2017, it required at least one MMTC license go to that black farmer, that lawsuit known as the Pigford class. And that case was about discrimination against black farmers by the federal government. Essentially, you had to be part of that Black Farmers Agricultural Association Florida chapter. But in practice, some people, although they met the qualifications of being part of that Pigford litigation, they weren't allowed to join that Black Farmers Association because for some unknown reason, the association wasn't accepting any new members, which effectively prevented effectively prevented anyone from receiving that license. So the intent of the Florida legislature wasn't really equity. I think, you know, as Troy put it, it's two different things. It was really diversity, and they didn't really deliver on that. We're sitting here on, you know, 8/13. Where's the black license?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and I'm putting into existence. I was about to say Senator Jones, but Rep. Jones will also. I mean, you were there in the midst of everything when things were going on in the state of Florida. So for you guys that are listening, and if you're in states like Georgia and Tennessee and Virginia and North Carolina, what I'm telling you, what's happening here, it's going to happen there. This is why we're having this conversation, and you got to be ahead of the curve. You will get people that will they identified and delineated a group of people and said, "Oh, that's social equity." That wasn't social equity.
It wasn't social equity.
It was just, VJ just said it. It was just one class, and guess what? That one class still hasn't applied. And Representative Jones, you were there in the midst of all this stuff, and you know, from a policymaker standpoint, go ahead.
No, I was saying I carried the repeal bill. We had to repeal it from the next year after we passed it.
Yeah.
You were there, right?
Mind you, we had to repeal it because guess what? You had an association that was doing some, maybe allegedly, some things that should not have been done. So I guess our next point is that now that we have established the battle lines of knowing between the difference between social equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion, how do we handle both things? Do we handle them both together? And you know, how do we make sure that the existing entities, if you guys don't realize, Trulieve has 50 stores in the state. You have other different organizations that have 15 and 25 stores in the state. What do you think that we need to be doing to make sure diversity, equity, and inclusion from us at that level, you know, parallel to the equity conversation?
Yeah, so I guess I can kind of start from my vantage point. You know, when we look at it, diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's not just checking the box. Although from a compliance perspective, that's all that's required for us in Florida is a checking of the box. It's more like in Florida, as it stands right now, I got 10% minorities last year. This year I got 15%. High fives all around. We're improving. That's what's required, but that is not going to help. We need to go beyond that. And as a company, that's kind of what we're doing. It's not about tallying how many Asian, Black, and Native American, and women and veterans that we have. It's extending that hand, bringing them up, and letting them be involved in decision making and actually decisive decisions that bring the company forward. Like our general manager, Mike Meador, he comes from Coca-Cola, and he joined in July 2019. And the first thing I remember he said is that we're going to create an environment where you can be yourself and drive the business. And that just gave a whole new breadth and attitude of our company that we don't have to abide by the social norms. You can be yourself in a meeting, bring ideas to the table, and then they'll be effective. And I think that's what's required is just decision-making and including people in the conversation and actually, you know, having that diversified analysis when making, you know, an objective or executing against your business plan. So
I wanted to jump in there. There's something to add to, you know, what Toy had mentioned. I think it's important for us to scaffold the conversation because there's there's a strange sci-fi type thing that happens when we began to discuss social equity. It's like a freeze ray locks in our language in such a way that we're unable to have the conversation except, you know, using those euphemisms, marginalized when the majority are Black, you know, well-funded, white men when we want to say so they stay well-funded. But what happens is that there's a nature that takes place, in my opinion, with social equity. I think it's important to be clear that social equity was created by white men, for white men, about non-white people. Let's just let that sink in for a minute, because the thing that happens inside of social equity is that it doesn't take into account the sentiment analysis of Black people, because it was not for that. And so as a result, we're unable to detect whether or not it's working or not working. I would like to pull back, and I think at some point, starting now and in the near future, we need to have a very clear, lucid discussion, and some action around what are the metrics in place to determine that social equity has not worked and may not need to exist anymore, and another system comes into place. Because if we don't do that, like for example, a question that comes to my head as I'm listening to the conversation, and I try to listen, you know, intently, is that at what point did people realize that apartheid was apartheid? What metrics did they use? Was there a percentage of ownership that they looked at or ignored? But the reality is, the answer to that question is too late. And the numbers had to be 90-something%, just like social equity is performing at this point. And so there's a nature to racism and a racist system that makes it very, very dangerous. And that's its ability to obscure its detection, also to interfere with data collection and the quality of data around it. And so that it can literally make you discuss it and not be able to discuss it from any other lens. So as we look at social equity and how it's played out, is that social equity keeps getting discussed as there is no other way to create, you know, ownership in cannabis for Black people, except that we talk about it through social equity. And I'm telling you that if the fact that it can respond, that means that racism or that system is sentient. And if it's sentient, it's obscuring the way we discuss it. Even in our conversation now, if we're not careful, it will make us talk about it as though there's no other way, there's no imagination on the planet Earth to arrive at Black people having ownership, deserved ownership in this industry. It'll make us think that diversity inclusion is the same as social equity. It'll make us hear 96% of ownership of 35,000 cannabis licenses nationwide from 33 seemingly or appearing autonomous states awarding that to white men. We'll hear that and not be able to function correct. And we'll still talk about social equity as though it has a chance. It'll make us watch as this thing rolls out, legalization for the last 10, 11, 12 years, and everywhere except where, you know, our sister is, social equity, if and when it showed up, it was on average 7 to 10 years late.
Right.
We'll discuss it like it's a real viable option, and quite honestly, it may not be. It may not be. I don't think it's inconceivable that the people who were wounded the most from this are actually the metric of how this thing should be designed. And being very honest and very straightforward, I don't think that people outside of our culture, specifically anyone else but Black people, can design a system that is going to be sensitive and affect us correctly, or it will be designed and created and it'll arrive too late and give everyone else first movers advantage. And we still will be discussing this a year from now as though it is a viable solution. So what I think should take place is that everywhere that it has started late, that is the scorecard for us saying it needs to end as it's been presented. We need to redo that idea and be open to the fact that it may possibly not even be called social equity. It may be called something else that we conceive. Because in every society, if you look at the sentiment analysis, if you check in with Black people and how they're being affected, then you're going to know exactly if it's effective or not, unless that is actually the way that you designed it to play out.
And one thing.
So let me ask you, look, Toy. I know you got so much. I know. So I'm gonna ask you a question and go into Toy. So just make sure for clarification purpose. So it is the desired outcome of what we were supposed to happen is where the frustration or maybe the imagining the redesigning should come into play, because the outcome of what we want to see has not happened. It has not met the bar that we were looking for. Is that what you're saying? It hasn't met the bar. It hasn't met the bar because we were not the designers of it. And so that's why I said it's like a sci-fi thing that takes place when we'd have this discussion, because we could on 6 of our 5 fingers name right off industries that all play out this same way because of our inability to craft the right language, and all these euphemisms take place. And then at the end, we're left scratching our head. Oh my God, how did that happen? So that's why I said, at what point did the people recognize apartheid to be apartheid? In fact, apartheid was apartheid before it was called apartheid. Had they checked with the South African, he would have told you, this is apartheid. So now they're checking with us now. We're on these conference calls, having these conversations about social equity, and we cannot stop it, except that we may have to pump the brakes and say, hey, this is apartheid. It's the same numbers if we do the stats. We're living in apartheid right now in America under the auspices of social equity. It's just a cooler phraseology, and it's more hip, so that it sounds social and it sounds equitable. And everywhere it's played out, it hasn't been equitable. 10 years, 7 to 10 years, Colorado just 2 weeks ago? Yeah. Just 2 weeks ago, in an already crowded space of well-funded, AKA white men, organizations that have the licenses, how can you start with no money just because you Black and you went to jail and now you got a license? Are you doing me a favor for real? What's sociable and what's equitable about that? All right, so Toy, you got it.
There's so much in that to unpack. I just feel like a heart thing to heart.
Unpack it, because we got lots of questions coming up. So you unpack that, and I'm gonna open up the questions. So go for it.
Because I think the most important point that Malik just made is that systems produce what they're designed to produce.
Yes.
So when you're surprised at what comes out of this thing, you have to change the system. Now, I don't know, I wish I knew how to dismantle a system that wasn't created by us. And then we don't pull all the levers of power to be able to dismantle. That is that is the billion-dollar question at this point.
Yeah.
I will say that this is how we attempted to try to do it. We looked at where are the barriers? One, access to capital, access to land. If you're talking about the people who have been harmed the most by this, and those are also the ones that are sometimes in the most economic disadvantaged position. However, I don't ever want to be in a situation where you say that everybody Black and brown that's trying to do this is automatically poor, because that's not true either. We see brothers in suits on the side of the street getting pulled over by, no matter what you have on, how articulate you are, what your job is. Nobody's asking my son if his mother used to be a senator. They see a 6'2" Black boy. That's what they see. So we understand that the systems that we're living under right now were not created by us, which is why we have to come at this differently. So, and trying to move this in the public sphere, you will also get the folks who want it now, because we deserve it now. In dismantling embedded, systemic, structural stuff that is designed together to make it nearly impossible to break through is not an easy thing to do. It is not. So if you say, like on the vertical integration in Florida, I'm looking at the top of my Brady Bunch screen at VJ on the vertical integration system. it is really difficult to compete in any type of system that has a vertical integration thing if you don't add new on-ramps, if you don't add other places to other access points to get in this industry. Anytime you set it up where the entire place is doing cultivation and retail and marketing and transport and legit, like all of those pieces, where the hell do you get in? So adding other on-ramps is something that is firmly within the legislature's ability to do. The other thing is creating a fund for people to access capital, because the biggest thing is, of course, these things go to the same. All these folks, a lot of them had genesis in the tech industry. A lot of people had genesis in high finance, like, you know, any of those, you know, just
anywhere you name, that's where
anywhere
they
you name. Because if you look, and I say it all the time, every time I'm met with consternation about I'm not moving fast enough. Remember, I'm only 8 months into this. It's like I can't fix everything Malik just broke down in 8 months by myself in a pandemic in this country with this judiciary. That's a little difficult. But if you're intentional at every point, so this plant has a lot. Now we know, like Wanda James in Colorado, first Black license owner in Colorado, will tell you, everybody who went west searching for gold didn't get rich, but the people who sold the picks and axes got rich.
Right.
So that we also need to pay attention to is the entire scope of the entire industry, the whole ecosystem that goes with this. Those don't require licensure. Those are other things too that you can actually start to add incentives and mandates to make sure that there's participation in. And we have to have our eyes on all of that. So what we did was we charged the original operators who got the benefit of being first movers. They had to fund the $31 million revolving loan that we targeted to our equity applicants. They had to pay for that. That's their cost for being first movers. Like everybody, we're very, very clear that the industry itself is not moving to do the buzzwords of social equity from some altruistic place. They're only doing it because we're making them do it.
Yes.
They're not gonna do it, you know, impetus. I'm glad that there's some very wonderful people in the space who want to lean in and understand that this is right. And you need partners and allies and all of that. And there are some great people who are doing it. But industry as a whole looks the way it does because it was allowed to. And at this point, you have to figure out multiple ways to break that system up. So we made them pay for the revolving loan program that is seeded to grow. Then you take the money from the plant, and all of it cannot go like what Colorado did. Said we're putting it all towards school. Like, yeah, we're going to tax and legalize. We're going to put it all towards schools. That did nothing for the people. It did nothing for nothing for people who were constantly harmed, harassed, over policed, and targeted by this. Nothing. And you're right, that didn't happen until about 2 weeks ago. So from the sale of the plant, that goes back into the community reinvestment program. So then you go, the money from the plant also is funding legal aid up and down Illinois. Illinois has 102 counties. What I know is that there's 800,000 people still being arrested for this every single year, and 92% of those stops are for possession. While we have a legal, thriving industry everywhere, everywhere. So at this point, it means, and because I don't have a better word, I know I don't have a better word than equity. And I know my definition of what equity is. I don't know any other way to say. You cannot take what was done on the backs of us without building something that is inclusive of us. And in order to do that in this system that we didn't create, this system that did not have benefits that inured to us, is to systemically, and strategically break it down at every single point with that premise at the middle of it. It really is the only way you can get at it. Otherwise, what happens will continue to happen. The best indicator of future behavior is the behavior of the past. And you name me any industry, not one, not media, not construction, not tech, not the retail, hospitality, hotel industry, airline, any industry there is. Not sports, where we are the backs of it and we don't own nothing. There's nothing we own 20% of, nothing. So this moment in time is meaningful for a couple different reasons. One is the year 2020, perfect vision. Look at this different. It's time to see this differently. And the only way you see it differently is if we don't ever take our eyes off what it is the prize. And that at the end of the day is, you ain't moving forward if you don't have somebody who looks like me sitting there.
So I have another question about that. And because I know, Toy, you have to leave, and I think what you've said is very powerful, very profound. Two things I would like to just quickly say. question. How open are you to, if after 12 months, because you said 8 months they've been waiting, if after 12 months, how open are you to having another conversation about this other thing?
Yes.
Because I think that there has to be an agenda.
Yes.
And we have to, again, establish those metrics.
Yes.
Because as well-intentioned as you are, and I feel your energy, that if indeed, and I think the other czars, I don't know anybody that's walking around today who already has on their resume, I've been a czar before. I don't even know how you become a czar, but nonetheless, you're a czar. So there are other czars who are faring far less as better than, far less than you. And they were maybe as optimistic at the 8th month period. So what I would like to know is, let me ask my question. So what I'd like to know is, at the point that you're overwhelmed because there's not enough toy Hutchinsons and we weren't able to clone you sufficiently. If you're overwhelmed and then we hit the 12th month, the 15th month, I would like to know, because I actually have a solution that does not require us waiting for us to have some power. Would you be open, and everybody else on this call, would you all be open for us to begin to have some conversations where we're not on the Brady Bunch situation like this, and we actually fix some things ourselves? Because we have more power in this year of vision than we think we do. Yeah. That's my question.
100%, because I don't think that I think this is the beginning. I don't think we haven't set the market thing. Like when we were looking at, we wanted to protect future market share because of the point you made earlier. Like when you wait very long and there's no competition and the licenses don't come out and these first movers get to operate for years and years and years with the benefit of no competition. We capped the first round of licenses that we came out. We could have upwards of 500 in the state of Illinois. We're only giving out 75 because we need to see if it worked. And we built into the legislation that you pause, and there's going to be a study. We're going to study all this, and not another damn thing is getting out of there unless it does what it is we intended it to do, or we make some tweaks along the way. The important thing about that is that you can't unring the bell. When you open the door, you say, let's tax and let's legalize like alcohol, and you open the door and hundreds of licenses fly out. You can't take that back.
Right.
Now you really do have a saturation of the market. You have monopolization of a space, and it's really difficult to get in there. We on purpose capped it so that there's only 75 coming out at first. Nothing else can come out until we say, okay, well, how did that work? Because this is a slow, multi-phase built-in approach to try to get at that. Now, as to trying to, what the next conversations are going to be, because like we did the flip the switch model in Illinois. We let the operators start, and the money, because we needed the money to start flowing to go into the community reinvestment piece. We needed the original operators to fund the revolving loan program for the equity things. And then you got to work on what the licensure is. As we were doing all of this, all happening at the same time. But the effect of it, we're not going to know for a couple of weeks yet when we start to get at that real ownership piece. But this is the one thing that I do know. I don't know whether we solve the problem, because I don't know that it's a solvable problem, to your original point. Like these systems they call it systemic and structural for a reason. It's baked in. So I don't know whether or not we hit the sweet spot. I do know that here in my state, we don't fight about whether we should do this. We fight about how we can do more.
Right.
Arguments that are here about, did you do enough? Can you do more? Can you add to this more? That is, I know that I'm in a unique position for that in and of itself, because this is truly, I know, generationally shifting in a lot of people's minds. And sometimes the hardest people to convince are the ones who have a well-earned distrust of anybody who looks like me saying, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. I don't believe you. So this requires understanding that the anger and the cynicism and the distrust and the demands and the people who are actually speaking truth to power on the ground to people who are in policy positions like me happen because it's earned. This is our lived experience. It's earned. And it plays an absolutely important and critical role in changing or dismantling anything. And that's why in this year of change and in this year of vision, If there was ever a time when we could lay down a ground mark that's different, it's now. It's right now.
Let me jump in right quick, and I want to make sure that just expressing Toy's messaging is because one thing that resonated with me when Toy, it's because her governor was working hand in hand with her, and it really having to have buy-in at that executive level, then going down to the legislative level and going from there. And I think it's real critical, a conversation to be had and to share as we are kind of dissecting it and digesting this information. I got some questions for you guys. I got a lot of questions, so I'm gonna rapid fire and then and maybe target some towards certain people. So this one, I'm gonna hit towards Chris Nanny. Is there anything being done for criminal justice reform? Do you feel like it should be at the top of the list in need of drastic change? Was that addressed in your social equity, with your book that you put out?
Yeah, so I would say the most important thing for criminal justice reform within cannabis programs is expungements. Before, I would say the last 3 years, we didn't see automatic expungements, and we're seeing that happen in almost every single state that goes online now. That's a mandatory part of them going online. And that's really the crux of criminal justice reform within cannabis programs. Expungements, what they do is they help someone with a criminal record, they expunge it so it's no longer a public record. So if you were going for a place of employment, looking for a new place to live, that wouldn't be on the record and it wouldn't be used to discriminate against you potentially.
Sure. Any other feedback about that on the social justice side? Next question. How can business owners attract minority employees? What are wages in Illinois for entry level? Does this wage meet and exceed minimum cost of living? I'll shoot the Toy, and then VJ, you may want to also weigh in on how do you attract diverse employees. So Toy, you want to go first?
So as it relates to cannabis, we had a hiring component in there too. It's like we recognized we couldn't take licenses away from majority owned companies, but we can change the way you have to operate. So if you're going to operate in our communities, you got to hire. It's like,
period.
You got to hire. I want to see you do like all your contractors. Like, I want to see that. I want to see how you change.
But guess what? But that force, I remember seeing several different hiring fairs and hiring events and the entities that weren't doing this 2.5 years ago.
No,
so
I was like, this ain't altruistic. So I wish it was. I wish everyone was like, you know what? That's the right thing to do.
Right.
I wish it was. There was a lot of people who came to that. As to the minimum wage question, I'll say that Illinois is actually in the process of moving to a $15 an hour minimum wage across the state. That's something that actually passed. It's a few years in the implementation. Depending on where you are, that's already, I think we're between 10 and 12 in the Cook County, which is the most populous county that includes the county seat, the city of Chicago. That's inclusive here. So most of our organizations are paying what is considered, and I would still say that if we had indexed minimum wage to inflation back in 1960, whatever it started, we'd really be at a damn near $20 minimum wage right now. So sure. We're at a point where a market rate 2-bedroom apartment is something you can do without assistance. We're not at a living wage yet, but yes, that was actually built into our effort here as well.
Okay, great. VJ, any comments on your side on hiring and marketing and recruiting diverse employees?
Yeah, so, if you look at our workforce, it's all walks of life from young, old, different national origins, Black, white, Asian, what have you. It's really, we try to cultivate the workforce for that specific dispensary that the dispensary is located in to nurture a sense of community. And it's not just about recruiting, right? It's really about developing too, right? So we have mentorship programs, exposing people to different jobs and career paths. You came in as this, but what about A, B, and C, and D? Have you ever considered looking at it? And also, when I say developing, giving them resources that they wouldn't already have exposure to. Something that we're looking at on a national perspective is providing financial education. So that means saving account information, alternative retirement options, financial navigation, just financial literacy, just to not only diversify the workforce, but also bring it up too and develop it.
You know what would be kind of cool if you guys add in already home ownership and have a realtor or a broker that automatically works with those employees and across the board on how to not only create your saving, but like the specific things, because one of the prime indicators of poverty and wealth is home ownership and being able, and we want to see more of that. So that might be something else to think about as well when you're thinking about what you want to do.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great idea.
Yep.
You'll talk more about it.
Marvin, question for you. I got this one. This is directly, I think, I want to find out your take on this. So someone said, how can we use the MORE Act to help us to become inclusive? And more importantly, Marvin, if you could just briefly talk about, your role in suing and or litigating against the federal government. Did you guys put any type of social equity in there in that suit, or it was all about legalization? Or can you give us a little bit of tidbit about that, please?
No, it's all about legalization. And I think the equity part's going to come later, because if national legalization, then it has to be a national bill. Because right now, one of the problems is that with all these cannabis laws and regulations, they change from state to state, municipality to municipality. And so there's no uniformity. But if we get on a national level, we're going to make sure that we have toy at the table and people of that, so we can have a national bill that definitely is going to help out the people that have been affected the most. Because the reason why I even joined the lawsuit was when I read the brief, you see the etymology of Schedule 1 or with Henry Enslinger way back in the 30s. It was because Henry Enslinger hated the jazz players and whatever, and Richard Nixon wanted to go after two groups. He wanted to go after the counterculture hippies of the 60s and 70s, and he wanted to go after African Americans, which he hated. Well, and that started.
He wanted alcohol to never be illegal again.
Exactly.
He wanted alcohol to never be illegal again.
No. And so that started the war on drugs in earnest. So you went from Richard Nixon to Ronald Reagan to George H.W. Bush. You went to the crime bill, and there's a lot of controversy with the crime bill. Now we got this other guy here, but it's affected us the most. We're 18 times more to get arrested because of cannabis, even though we smoke at the same rate as the majority do. So this, on a national level, for me, it's important because it was systematic. It was targeted to come after our community. They knew it was what it was going to do, and it did. So if we get this case and we get a win, it's just the beginning. It's just the beginning, because then we have to make sure that we're on a level playing field and making sure that we participate in this industry, because time, this is at the beginning. And you look back about legalization about 8 to 10 years ago, that's like, the Model T or the Wright brothers, their first
of cannabis.
This is early. This is way early. And you talk about 2020, and this year a lot of things are happening. Well, it needs to happen because we haven't had a freaking counterculture or revolution since the 60s, basically. So let's have it. Let's have it now, because as I always say, man, people are not going to share the profits. And we have an opportunity right now to do not business as usual, but let's do a better business. Let's do a better business, and we can lead it, because cannabis and hemp and CBD, man, it can disturb any market that it goes into. This is going to be big. Right now, we're $13 billion. We're bigger than the NFL. We're going to be huge. We can lead the way in the 21st century, but it has to be done right, because we're not going to get another chance to do this again.
I agree. Great feedback. Next question. Greetings all. Regarding transparency, do regular citizens have access to see how cannabis tax revenue is being spent after the legislation has passed it? Maybe Toy, you got some feedback about that. Like, so, after you have an adult use and, money has been generated in tax revenue that goes to the state, and they spend that money, do citizens have a chance?
Funding the police departments like they did in Oregon.
Yeah. In Oregon, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So you have to make sure, but go ahead.
No, you have to build in accountability measures, and that's a really critical part to not overlook. So one of it is, like the ability to FOIA all that stuff and create reporting procedures so that it's on Front Street, so everybody can see everything.
Right.
The other is that people will see the cannabis receipts and not understand the difference between the gross receipts that are inuring to the operators and the levels of taxation that's inuring to the state, and then what it is you do with those dollars. So the figuring out how to make sure that people know exactly what's happening and how it's happening and where you see it should really be built into the effort as it is. When we first started, you didn't know who the owners were.
Right.
You didn't know who these people were. And then there were lots of mergers and swaps and all the rest of stuff. So we tried to fix it in the adult use, where you have to disclose all the way down to 5%, like operating agreements and the owners all the way down to 5%. Because you don't really have an equity program if you don't know who the people are. And if there's too easy to like hide various things like that. So by the time the stuff is, the goal for me is at the time that this is announced, these new entities come out or announced, that everybody, activists, press, our departments, everybody will be able to see exactly who's who. And you will know very quickly if folks aren't who they say they are. It's amazing what sunlight does to disinfect them.
With that being said, guys, we are at our 5:20 mark. I mean, this has been exciting. I want to go around real quick, 30 seconds. What's next for you in the back half of 2020? We've come through, and hopefully we're going through this pandemic, and we're going to be on the brighter side of it. What do you have? What's on your docket, VJ? And then let go Chris after that. And what are you looking to accomplish before the end of the year?
Yeah, so, we're really focused on our license renewal and building our diversity program. Roz, we've had discussions with you. We're hoping to further those discussions. From a national perspective, we're rolling out new diversity initiatives from the financial literacy component that I spoke about earlier in our other states like New York. And we're going to develop those case studies there in New York and Massachusetts, and then deploy it here in Florida, Florida being one of the largest markets. We want to get it right the first time, so we're testing out in other states. But yeah, that is what's up for me in the next 6 months.
And what's your website? What's your website, VJ?
You can visit us at growhealthy.com or on Facebook, Instagram, all your social channels. Learn more about the industry, learn more about us, our mission, and check out our products.
Thanks, VJ, so much. It was good to have you on, brother. Chris, Nanny, 30 seconds. What you got going on, brother?
Hey, so I actually just got a job teaching cannabis, so I'll be doing that in the upcoming future. So I'll be working on some PowerPoint slides, making those interesting. But aside from that, I'm really also focusing on the next case study for social equity, and it's more than likely going to be Illinois' cannabis program. So very much anticipating, it coming to be. So I'll just be waiting for that to happen.
And how can people find your book with the different authors who have weighed in on social equity?
Sure. So all of my research, it's published on SSRN, or if you want to go to my LinkedIn page, it's also on there. It's pinned to the very top.
Okay. And then we're going to have it, we're going to figure out how to get it on M4MM's website, because we have Eric Range, our board chair, weighed in on it. I think it's a document that's definitely worth people reading and learning and educating themselves on. So thank you so much for being on, Chris. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Toy, 30 seconds, my love. What's going on? What's the next thing for you?
I'm dying to see whether this works. We're gonna get these licenses out. We have to start our disparity study. And I'm beginning to think about how to layer equity into what the 2.0 conversations are gonna be as we start to look at things like delivery and social consumption, and continuing to dismantle the systems that are put in place like that. So that's all I can't see past that right now. That's big enough. But
that's enough.
That's enough. We're able to learn from all of you all. Chris, I would love to have your document, your social equity document, the paper that you've already written. I'd love to see that if you share that with me offline. And I'm so grateful to meet everybody. Thanks for allowing Illinois to pop into this Florida conversation.
I know. Girl, you already know. So you have been so awesome, and we look forward, and we wish you well in all your endeavors and everything that you're doing for the state of Illinois.
I pray.
Yeah. We pray. Marvin Washington, brother, what's going on? What's the next 6 months looks like for you?
Just same old, man. Changing our business mantle from brick and mortar, which you got a bunch of stock sitting in stores that are not open, like Vitamin Shop, and going to e-commerce and direct to consumer. Up here, just staying in contact with the shareholders up in Harlem and Brooklyn, because we believe New York City is going to go adult use next year, and position myself for America 2.0 when it opens back up, man. I think it's going to be the things that went away. It was time for them to go away, and the things that come out of this, we're going to flourish for the 21st century.
I believe it, man. You've been on the scene for a long time, so I appreciate you so much.
It's only been 6 years, but it is a long time in cannabis.
That's like a lifetime in cannabis.
Hey, but I want to say, Roz, if y'all need any help or whatever, you know who I know in Florida with Rusan and whatever, and tell John Morgan to cut the check.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Hey, I'll tell him that you said that, because he needs to cut the check.
Tell him I said that.
I will tell him that. Malik, Dexter, Melik, I'm sorry, Dexter, I always go Malik, but you know where I'm coming from, brother. You give us your 30 seconds. What you got next?
I have a 80% of all the weed grown in California leaves California. And based upon the arrest rates, there's something that we have to take note of, and that is Black and brown people actually control the marijuana industry. So I have a solution with those type of people from the legacy market, as well as allies and Black owners in this industry. I'm telling you, I have the solution. I wouldn't say that unless I do. So I'm asking, everyone here with the Brady Bunch family that's on this viewing call here, for us to let's trade real personal information. If you're down, let's get down, because I'm telling you, we can do this from the inside.
No, I love it. And guess what? I'm connected to everybody. I'll connect you guys all. State Representative Jones had to jet out, so he wants to share his apologies. Listen, guys, we got people now still asking for more information, and I got someone just made a comment. They want your breakdown of social equity versus diversity and inclusion, Toy. So we're gonna figure out how to take that little segment and push that baby out to everybody. but thank you guys. Thank you for just, when I call you, you come. I mean, I ain't have, like, it was just like, yep, I'll do it. I appreciate you. I love you. For everyone that's on with us today, please give a shout out to the Cannabis Lab and all the work they're doing, Minorities for Medical Marijuana, and all the powerful organizations out there doing a hard job and working hard. We're doing it to make a difference in people's lives. And I will turn it now back over to Eric Stevens. Eric, thank you, my brother. Appreciate you.
Hey, thank you, Roz, and to all of our panelists for another great discussion. I look forward to having another one here in the future, and what we can do as we all continue to work together. As you know, there's an Elevate Your Grind coming up after this. There's an election on Tuesday. There's some open, contests, and some are, only for partisan purposes. But then there's an election after that. So make sure you're involved and staying involved with everything that's happening. And then we'll recap that on next Thursday's C-Lab event like this as well. And I talk about what's happened. I know Chev was out there in the street. The early voting's been happening. It's going to continue. And so thank you to everybody. Thank you, Roz, for organizing this, and every panelist. Amanda, Rob, everybody else. Greatly appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a great one. Bye.